find today?
All right. Well, we're live right now. This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube with none other than politician, UFO, JFK, conspiracy researcher, former professional wrestler in the WWF, where he wrestled right here in Wichita, Kansas, where I am now for WWE and other cities. He's wrestled for AWA, was a big star with the AWA, feuding for titles and stuff. The illustrious Jon Stewart, who's going to talk to us today about the JFK files.
Yeah, I've been holding this back for a while. I've mentioned it a couple of times in the past 6 years, Hannibal. And first of all, and so I'm going to tell you the whole story, folks. We're not going to be here very long. But one of the things that this person said that tangentially relates to JFK and obviously Oswald, I think if it's 10% true, it it ends a portion of the American mythos of government, if I can be so bold. But you make that decision in 5 or 10 minutes from now. But Hannibal, going over all of the commentary and the files myself, I went over them for like 4 hours the night they were released. Um, just a couple of very quick observations. That has been lauded and agreed with by even the ardent skeptics, which is the CIA in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s really acted as their own government, as a state within the state, killing dictators, killing presidents of countries, killing leaders, assassinating anyone that would get into the way of the perceived interests of the United States of America on a global stage. And uh, the most alarming part is that hiring the Chicago mob to do many of their dirty work. I want to tell people something that they need to take away from this interview, which is if you think the CIA sits in a room in the 1960s and calls up one of their James Bond assassins that works for the CIA, gets a paid paycheck from the CIA, you're crazy. It doesn't happen that way. They use mercenaries for hits. They use ex military. They use other branches of the military. Very important. There's a famous story about that. And as ABC News Channel 7 in Chicago has have the documents have proven that the CIA, and you're going to need to know this from what I'm about to tell you, hired the Chicago mob for many of its dirty works, its wet works, the assassinations. It is known, it is a fact with documents that they hired the Chicago mob, namely Johnny Roselli, who was the mob liaison to the CIA, hired him to poison Castro on 4 or 5 attempts, which he was obviously unsuccessful. They hired the mob, the Chicago mob specifically, in World War II. And as the documents I'm sure will show, that many testimonies of ex mafia, but testimony of an alleged grassy knoll shooter himself, of somebody like Michael Francesi, whose dad was the underboss in a New York family, and the jailhouse undercover recordings of Carlos Marcello and James Trafficante, the boss in Florida and the boss in New Orleans, where they admitted to ordering and help orchestrating the hit on JFK. And there is probably, Hannibal, no one else in history, a leader, no one else in history other than Caesar that had more enemies than John F. Kennedy. And I will be frank, and I hope people can appreciate this, a president who did more to upset more groups, more people than John F. Kennedy did. His father made a deal with the Chicago mob to win him Illinois, which won him the presidency over Nixon, and promised that they would lay off on the mob. And his brother, Robert F. Kennedy, the attorney general, went full force against the mob in prosecuting them and following Giancana to the point where Giancana had to go and get a court order to stop the FBI pursuit of him the following of Giancana. It was maddening. He would failed in the Bay of Pigs, which then did not allow the mafia to go back into a pro democracy Cuba and open up their casinos again. We're talking millions and millions of dollars. He wanted to splinter the CIA. Hannibal, can you imagine the a group of pro wrestlers and one person wants to break up the entire promotion and tell everybody to go find jobs on the independent circuit? Can you imagine what the anger would have been towards somebody that wanted that? And JFK wanted to do that with the CIA. He was taking away the federal oil, the depletion act with big oil in Texas, which gave him made him an enemy of some very, very powerful individuals. And one of the biggest things I have found out was that that Sam Giancana's girlfriend, um, uh, uh, Phyllis McGuire, was also having an affair with John F. Kennedy, and that is in Omerta, in the mob, in the outfit. That is one of the number one rules. You do not take or have an affair with another made guy's wife or girlfriend. That is an immediate one-way ticket for surefire death. So I have listed probably, you know, 10 groups or 10 people that had massive reasons to assassinate John F. Kennedy. People that have admitted this. This is not me, some crazy bald pro wrestler speculating.
And this
Um,
is based off of information you already had or new information that you've read about so far from the declassified files?
Well, this was the information that I already had from the jailhouse recordings and from this grassy knoll shooter that I allege that I will talk about. But what the files have shown us so far is that the CIA operated with a complete impunity in regards to the federal government, and that the CIA was in collusion, especially with the Chicago mob. So when I tell you about the confession of the alleged grassy knoll shooter, a low-level Chicago outfit member and a driver of Chuck Nicoletti, it is no longer a crazy theory or a crazy uh, 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 confession from a low-level mafioso person from Chicago. It has legs. It has tremendous legs, and I would like to, and I would like to right now go over exactly what happened in that. In 1993, ladies and gentlemen, in and about that, a FBI source, FBI agent named Zach Shelton tipped off a private investigator named Joe West that the grassy knoll shooter, allegedly, potentially, was a low-level Chicago mafia hitman, a driver for Charles Nicoletti, who was the Chicago hitman. His name was James Files, and he was born under James Sutton. And this man has a tremendous story to tell. They finally convinced him to go on camera and tell the story. And he tells a very interesting story that, he was the grassy knoll shooter, that this wasn't some big mastermind 5-month plot, that he was sent to Dallas to be a weapons liaison, the holder of the weapons, driver of the getaway car. And during the morning of the assassination, he was asked to be a backup shooter on the grassy knoll. Okay. So he claims that he had a gray poplin jacket, a fedora hat on. He used an experimental weapon called the Remington Fireball, and this carried a 222 round, very high velocity, not big recoil on it. And he claims that when he looked around the plaza an hour or two before the Kennedy motorcade arrived, that he called it a reunion at the old folks home. So many intelligence men were there, including, this is going to be a big part of what I'm going to tell you today, George H. Bush, who was near against the wall at the Texas Book Depository. Now, James Files was instructed by Charles Nicoletti and Johnny Roselli, the CIA liaison. Now, we believe that Lyndon Johnson gave the umbrella feeling, the blanket feeling of this guy's got to go. Lyndon, it was going to be outed in Life magazine for murder, corruption on a scale unprecedented in American politics. He was not going to be on the slate as vice president in the next election with Kennedy. And you also have to understand Marcello and Trafficante, the two mob figures that I believe also gave the order, but were also let it be known that we need this guy gone. They were one was in actually in court and actually during a court proceedings for sending him to jail for life, and I think Marcella was being indicted. So these two men's backs were against the wall, and so was LBJ. LBJ just wasn't going to be admonished from the government. Ladies and gentlemen, what Life magazine claimed in research that he did, murders, corruption, bribery, was going to put him in jail for the rest of his life. I cannot underestimate the precedence of that. And the fact that the CIA was going to be dissolved, well, this gave the CIA at least the ability to help grease the tracks. And I use that a lot in a lot of my investigations. The CIA to help grease the tracks, to get things out of the way, to use subterfuge and move the investigation after the assassination away from the real shooters, which were some members of the Chicago mob. Now, James Files said that Johnny Roselli flew in on a MATS transport, military and transport from Lantana. That is now verified by the pilot who flew that plane from Lantana, Florida to Fort Worth that morning. And Roselli was ordered to abort the mission. I want to be very clear. Roselli, the CIA liaison, was ordered, we don't know who, James Files doesn't know who, to abort the hit on Kennedy. Maybe they got cold feet. Maybe Lyndon was going to roll the dice and take their chances. James Files, the alleged Grassy Knoll shooter, said with him, Roselli, and Nicoletti all together the morning before the assassination, Johnny Roselli said to Nicoletti, they want us to abort. And Chuck Nicoletti said to Roselli, what are we going to do? And Roselli said, I didn't hear nothing from the old man. That would be Sam Giancana from Chicago, who JFK was having sex with his girlfriend. I didn't hear nothing from the old man. Fuck it, we're a go. From James Files. Sounds like a very compelling story to me. Roselli and Nicoletti went into the Daltex building, which was just, if you looked at the book depository, it was the building to the right. Window open. There's a photograph of it. Unknown who was in the Texas book depository. I do believe that Oswald's Carcano rifle was used to fire some of the bullets. Absolutely. Whether it was Oswald or not, that is still for debate. And what the files have shown us in the past 2 days, Hannibal, is the CIA knew about Oswald since 1960. So the CIA director in 1965 and to the Warren Commission completely lied to the American public that we didn't know anything about Lee Harvey Oswald. They had a 205 file on him, 3 inches thick, going back to the 60s. So I digress. James Files says, look, he was ordered to be the last shot. If all the shots failed, he was to be the one. And Hannibal, I can give you this video later on of Files telling this. And so he waited and he heard shots being fired. He saw Kennedy's body lurch, but he knew that what the objective was a headshot, and he did not see a headshot as he had Kennedy in the scope of the fireball. And at his last field of fire, before if he shot, he would get Jacqueline Kennedy involved because of the angle of the shot. He took the shot, aimed for Kennedy's right temple, which would be his left eye if we were looking at him head on. And he believes that Charles Nicoletti's bullet struck Kennedy a tenth of a second before James Files' fireball, a mercury-tipped fireball, hit Kennedy just above the temple. In witness testimony, in the Dictabout recordings, Hannibal, The last shots were 2 shots, and it went boom, boom. So Files was actually correct on somebody. He believes Nicoletti fired that shot just moments and milliseconds before Files fired the final fatal shot. Allegedly, Files said he bent down. He put the Remington Fireball into a case. He reversed his jacket to a plaid pattern on the other side of his poplin jacket, which emulated a railroad worker, an iron worker, a blue collar, industrial type worker. And he had this Dooney Burke fedora on. The Mary Mormon photograph taken from the opposite side of the street shows the picket fence line. What does that photo show? A Dooney Burke hat folks, look it up for yourself. A Dooney Burke hat just over the fence line. All you can see is the hat. James Files said everybody rushed past him thinking he was a railroad worker to go to find the alleged gunman further into the railroad yard parking lot. Now, Lee Bauer, who was in the railroad tower, said he saw a man with a plaid jacket walk away with a bag. And he believes that man was right at the spot where the puff of smoke was, obviously, allegedly taking a shot at President Kennedy. So that's James Files. Here is, in my opinion, the absolute bombshell. Hannibal, a bombshell. So I'm having lunch with James Files, and he is talking fondly about George H. Bush.
When did you have lunch with him? This was 93 that you were talking about?
No. I learned this. He was outed in 93. I had lunch with him, I'm going to say 2021 in Melrose Park, where he hung out, where he once lived. And during lunch, first of all, if Mr. Files ever sees this, we haven't talked to each other in about a year. Just a gentleman. I've known many mafia people, ladies and gentlemen. I've lived in Chicago for 58 years. They can give you the creeps. They give you weird vibes. Mr. Files didn't do that. Just, calm, normal. Matter of fact, Professor Jerry Roth, a JFK researcher expert, said the same thing that I said about meeting James Files. Matter of fact, substantial information, no indications of lying or deception. Again, says I don't know a lot of times, which is not a hallmark of a liar. So we're finishing lunch, and he goes on, folks. This is the bombshell of the bombshells. And he said, yeah, George H. Bush was not my handler. David Atlee Phillips was. And I said, I know that name. Isn't that Oswald's handler? And he said, yes. David Atlee Phillips was Oswald's handler too. I would have to check in with David Phillips. Every time I went somewhere or out of town, I would have to phone him, tell him where I was. And he said, but I also got a lot of help whenever I needed it from Pappy. I'm like, who's Pappy? He said, well, George Bush. I said, George H. Bush? He said, yeah, he was CIA all the way. And he said this is a mafia guy allegedly shot the president, is telling me this. He's a lovely man. Oh, he called me Johnny, James Files. It's like, Johnny, anything I ever asked of him, advice, logistical work, anything I asked of George H. Bush, he would do it for me. He never gave me an issue. He was nice to me on the phone. He was always concerned. He treated me like an uncle-nephew relationship. And I found that pretty fascinating that he spoke so highly of him. Not that I don't believe that, because I heard from other people in politics that George H. Bush was a decent, a decent man socially. And he goes, and he's the reason why I volunteered for the Watergate assignment. I'm like, I mean, can you imagine, Hannibal, you sitting there and this was being told to you? Now I'm a Watergate aficionado, folks. I said, what Watergate assignment? He's like, well, here's what the press won't tell you because they don't know. And here's what's never been told. And Mr. Files has told this publicly twice, not just to me. So I'm not getting him in trouble or myself, but it's never hit the public or the media. He said that I know the real reason why we broke into the Watergate apartment complex, office complex. Yes, we wanted to bug the Watergate phone. a better way because there was too much static. We wanted to look for things that would incriminate the DNC. But the biggest thing, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to listen to me. The biggest thing we were looking for in the Watergate burglary was a 16 millimeter film that showed a Cuban exile training camp. I thought it was USEPA, the USEPA Island off the coast of Florida. I could have swore he gave a name in the Everglades, a Indian sounding name in the Everglades. Either way, he said, Johnny, this 16 millimeter film is the most explosive in American history. You see a 1950s Army troop transport truck, the six-wheeler, and it pulls up and along a line of men that are standing there, some soldiers, some regular, civilians. The tarp goes up, and Cuban exiles in a training mission file out of the back of this army vehicle and start getting into formation. Folks, as the camera pans to the left, smiling and watching the ongoings of this Cuban exile trained soldiers coming out of this army truck, was George H. Bush and Lee Harvey Oswald standing next to each other in a group of other people watching these ongoings. And he said, that is the reason. He said, I didn't go into I didn't break in. I was to drive, take the film and then drive it to another location, me and Barry. I said, Barry who? He said, Barry Seals. I said, wait a minute. You mean the Tom Cruise movie, the Barry Seals, the CIA pilot? He said, yes. Again, this is what I like about Miss Jim Files. Speaks very highly of people. He's like, Johnny was a great guy. I love Barry. And we were sitting there cracking jokes, waiting for these burglars, to get us the film. And he said that the film where George H. Bush and Lee Harvey Oswald are standing together at a Cuban exile training facility in the Florida Keys. He said that Barry Seals eventually got a hold of that film. However, he did. He got a hold of it, and that's one of the reasons why he was murdered. I think 58 gunshots were fired into his car in the 1980s, maybe the late 70s. You can look that up on the internet. And he said that's one of the reasons why he assassinated him, is because whoever the powers that be, knew that he had that film showing, allegedly, folks, allegedly, George H. Bush, Lee Harvey Oswald standing together at this Cuban exile training camp. I will end with this. It was called Operation 40, to train the Cuban exiles to retake Cuba and oust Fidel. It is in the CIA documents that Oswald was at this training camp. So I am not, I'm putting Oswald there, by unicorns, pink clouds, and fluffy, furry elephants. It's in the CIA documents that Oswald was in that camp, brought to that camp, helped out in that camp, called Operation 40. And that is the bombshell.
And that's very interesting. I got to ask you, one of the documents released had to do with UFOs, which they called quote unquote unknowns, where JFK, only 10 days before he was killed on November 12th, sent a memorandum to the director of the CIA wanting to talk about these. Have you read this?
I have, and I want to be very clear, and I hope you appreciate this. From everything that I have been told, I have read, I have heard from other expert researchers, the killing of John F. Kennedy was months and months before November 20 in November of 1963. And the media needs to know this. Oh, this is salacious. And the UFO people, oh my God, he was killed. No. Was this the final, if they were going to call it off, was this the final cherry on top, if I can use basic analogy? Was this the final coup de grace, the final straw that completely broke the camel's back? Absolutely. There is a burned document that calls that Lancer, JFK's Secret Service name, had to be wet. That means killing. That's a CIA term for killing. That Lancer had to be wet because of his inquiries with the UFOs. Not only his inquiries, but sharing that information with Russia. That's a fact. But I want, if anybody in the media, in the UFO world can please hear me, that was 10 days before the assassination. This assassination, the planning of this assassination started way, way, way in late summer, way before November of 1963. Folks, you have to believe that. However, was this the final coup de grace? Absolutely. And there's a burn memo that was retrieved from a burn pile that says an alleged MJ12 document, Lancer has to be wet. And that is the code for wet is a Russian term for assassinating somebody. So if there was any hesitation, I'll end here. If there was any hesitation by anybody, like, well, he's got a young family, he's a nice guy. Let's give him a pass. No way. No way. And that document pushed it over the edge, no doubt. But you have to believe me, from mob sources, from government insiders, the planning started all the way back in August. So that memo had nothing to do with his being assassinated.
So have all the declassified documents been released now, or is this going to be a process that's going to take a while? Because there was what, 40 to 80,000, I think, a huge
Yeah,
number.
right. There's more that he needs to be released. They said that. I think it was Tulsi Gabbard that said that, or Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, that there's at least, they know, 3,500 more. Folks, people have credited me with a lot of things, good and bad. Credit me with this. I'm going to tell you the unvarnished truth. If you think that the CIA in the past 70 years let a document in there that says we will take care of Kennedy, and it's not going to happen. You're not going to see it. There was a document by Underhill, a CIA, a military intelligence person that claims that, he was told Kennedy's going to be killed, the assassin's going to be assassinated, so on and so forth. But if you're going to think you're going to see a document that says, we must eliminate Lancer, it's not going to happen. And I don't want to burst anybody's bubbles. However, we can prove that the CIA lied about knowing Oswald. We can we can piece this mosaic together, that the CIA was operating as its own government, assassinating heads of state and other people at will, and that they knew everything about Oswald, period.
What do you make of David Grush possibly now being involved with the declassification task force for the UFO side of things?
I think it's great. I've said it on many occasions. David, if you hear me, you're just an incredible human being. You're one of my heroes. It's an honor to you and I having a intermediary that we communicate with. I won't go any further. I am so proud of you. America is proud of you. Um, keep keep flying the flag. Keep asking questions. Help Luna. I'm going to send Rep Luna a poster size picture of the alien interrogation. So expect that in the mail to get her attention. But I am tickled to death. I am so grateful and so happy that David Grush has been brought aboard, a highly intelligent, sincere person of our government that is gonna do a lot of good for the committee. And David, God bless you and Godspeed.
Did you hear anything about what's been talked about lately, that Lou Elizondo no-showed a speech, UFO speech, because he was supposedly meeting with Donald Trump Jr., briefing him on the whole UFO situation? That was the official reason
Right.
given for no showing.
Right. Lou was former counterintelligence. I'm not saying he's a liar, but you have to take some stuff what he says. Yes, the CIA did go rogue. And I believe there was an element in the CIA, if I'm going to answer Sage Pup, there was about a 12 to 13 member contingency in the CIA for the assassination. Okay. But yeah, you have to take a lot of stuff with Lou, and with raised eyebrows, and just sit back and do the Danny Sheehan where he goes, okay, okay. I have a tremendous problem with the way Lou came out. the non-specifics and the stuff he was busted on, where with ATIP and OSAP, I expected more from him. That's just me. So take whatever Lou says is not to heart, and as many people have told me, a coin a phrase, put it in the file.
Where do you sit with Greer right now? Because Greer has spoken out a lot against Lou. Lou, of course, these two are adversaries in the
Yeah,
UFO
yeah,
community. Greer has also claimed that he's sent reports to this this presidential office, but hasn't actually.
right,
I don't think he's claimed to have been taken there for any formal briefings like Lou is
right.
claiming now. Where do you sit with Greer?
Yeah.
His
Look,
credibility.
yeah. I can't sit here and disseminate all of Stephen Greer's claims. That's not my job. That's not what I want to do. And that's not what that it will only distract me from completely proving, the whole Project Aquarius in this alien film. I can tell you this every time I've reached out to Stephen Greer, I get a text or an email or a phone call within minutes. He doesn't have to do that to a bald, crazy, bust out pro wrestler. And Stephen Greer and Richard Doty, who take a lot of heat from the community, if those two men came in my life, a guy that failed English class in high school 2 years in a row, if it wasn't for Doty and Greer, I would have never written a book and published it, and I never would have put my documentary out. Greer and Doty are the the main reasons that allowed me to write a book and put out a full-fledged documentary. And people have to know that. That's important. When you reach out and help somebody, when you give somebody a hand, when you pick somebody up and give them breath under their wings, that says something. And I'm not here to dissect and disseminate every one of Stephen Greer's claims. That's not my job, and that's not for me to do that. That's not my relationship with him. My relationship is, let's find the truth. And as he has told me many times, I will help you any way I can. And I am so grateful for Stephen Greer and Richard Doty in my life. I mean, my best friends didn't help me write a book and make a documentary. I'm not saying that to be glib, but for two strangers to facilitate, to help me do that, I think the world of both of them. And it's not up to me to take apart their statements. That's up for the public's perception and their analysis.
And you actually tried to get me an interview with Richard Doty. Doesn't
Well,
seem he wants to talk to me, but maybe he'll do one with you on the channel.
yeah. Oh
Uh,
no, no. Richard Doty will talk to you. He travels a lot. I will facilitate it. When I give Richard Doty the green light on someone, you're gold. Believe me, we will get him on. And I told him. I think you were CC'd in the email that you'll do a great job and ask great questions. So we will get that done. I promise.
Dime Dryer the Fourth wants to know: are they going to declassify documents on George H.W. Bush?
Oh. Well, George H.W., that's two people. George H. Bush, that's the father. George W. George W. is probably I'm so disgusted by what he did in his time as president and the people that died in Iraq. I don't even want to talk about him. George H. Bush, who knows? I mean, there's a document out there. It says George Bush from the CIA. It's a CIA declassified document. So, and it's funny. The only person in America, folks, in 1963 that didn't know where they were the moment JFK was shot was George H. Bush. He has publicly said that he doesn't remember where he was when John F. Kennedy was shot. And James Files said as he walked towards the Chevrolet to meet Roselli and Nicoletti, it was parked at a gas station. He walked by the front of the Texas Book Depository, and George H. Bush was there, and he gave him a wink, and George Bush gave him a wink back.
He says he was talking about George Sr. and Sage Pup. Does
Yeah,
not like George Sr. at all.
yeah. If there are documents, it's hey, what I just told you, what James Files said about Bush and Oswald, that could topple a segment of the government as far as like the mythos, the story, the bullshit. because this is all bullshit, folks. If you haven't, we're living in it's a dreamland. Did you see what money was given away at USAID? You know, homosexual indoctrination in Afghanistan, and I don't care about gays. I'm just saying, Sesame Street in Iraq and Ireland. It's our fraud. Asexual. I mean, just ridiculous. This is a joke. And they're using your tax dollars. That's what bothers me now. It's bothered me 30 years ago. I worked my ass off for my entire life, and you're using my tax dollars and my family and friends and neighbors' tax dollars for bullshit, for obfuscation, for murder, and for covering things up. And that's got to end. It's got to end.
Yeah, I hadn't even heard about what you're talking about there. And
So go to Google money given away under USAID. You will vomit in a bucket. You'll vomit in a bucket because I know you're a hard worker too. You'll vomit in a bucket.
yes, some of us actually have to work very hard to earn money.
Right. Right.
I know you're busy today, but you're coming back for a wrestling
Yeah.
interview
Can't wait.
at 5 p.m. Eastern on Sunday with Jack Kilby. Before we went on, you were telling me you were actually there for the Ultimate Warrior and Sting's first match ever in Memphis. Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, I went to Memphis State University specifically because I heard wrestling was popular down there and that they had a school, which wasn't true. But back in '86, it was like the mafia. There was no formal way to get into the wrestling business. So I went to Memphis State and, knew that the wrestling matches were at the Coliseum. And I bought a ticket. I remember what I wore. I had a little. I looked like a little tennis geek. White polo, white shorts. Everybody in the Coliseum was like, "Who is this college nerd?" Anyways, it was Sting and the Ultimate Warrior's first tag team match. What were they called? Not Strike Force, but whatever. And the guy that ended up training me, Buddy Wayne, was their manager. I remember as a fan,
The
and
Blade
I was a pretty
Runners.
Blade Runners. I was a pretty smart fan at the time. Freshman in college, I've been following wrestling for 10 years. And even as a fan, I'm in the Hannibal, I'm in the audience and I'm doing this, looking at the ring going, oh my God, they can't even lock up. My friends in high school, I taught them to lock up. Tony Ronaldo, Brian Hill, Perry Gentile, Steve Stump. My friends could lock up and do arm drags and locked up good. These guys couldn't even place the headlock. They couldn't do, to get a wrist. They were clueless when to tag in and out. It was a total abortion. But I was there for their first match. I believe that was August or September of 1985. So check that out.
Wow.
It was
Very
horrible. It was
interesting.
it was horrible. And to see how good Sting got, amazing, amazing.
And Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern, you're going to be on here this
Yeah,
Sunday, March, I guess, 23rd, is it?
yeah. Can't wait.
Um, answering all those questions. I will say you didn't give a very good answer on the Snuka murder question, though. You
I know
danced
that.
around it.
No, I'm gonna. We should start right off with that. I will give a better, cohesive answer. I know I fumbled it, but I was nervous, and I will.
Yeah.
I will readdress the Jimmy Snuka confession to me just outside of Pine Bluff on the 405 Expressway at 1 o'clock in the morning. I will address it, and I won't fumble my words.
All right, because a few people were complaining about that.
Yeah.
I'm just giving you hell for
No,
it,
no.
but
I want. It bothered me too, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to address it so people won't be disappointed. So,
his ghost isn't going to haunt you. Don't
no,
worry.
right, right.
Last thing from Diamond Drawer. What's your opinion on HARP, which I don't even know what this is?
Yeah, HARP is the High Altitude Aerial Research Project that blasts um, high frequencies into the ionosphere, and it bounces back down at a specific location on planet Earth. I believe that was first. It was tried to be. It was invented to do extremely low frequency with submarines under the water to communicate with them. And they allegedly found out that it could sometimes manipulate weather patterns, that it could cause geologic disturbances in the ground. Pretty scary stuff. And it's still operating. And I believe it's somewhere in Alaska. Very scary. Yeah.
Are you still off social media?
No, I'm off all social media except YouTube. It's Hunting Victor, the Hunting Victor YouTube channel. I post every now and then, but yeah, as part of my own sanity and my marriage staying cohesive for another 25 years. Yeah, I need Jon Stewart needs to concentrate on, domestic issues, not fighting with UFO skeptics.
Yeah,
I
don't
can't take it
waste your
anymore.
energy on
Yeah,
that.
I can't take it anymore. You read it, X. I can't take it anymore. So
Apparently, there's over 100 HARP facilities on the planet.
okay. Sounds accurate because I know
Usually,
they're
his
still running.
information is accurate.
Yeah, thank you.
From
Yeah, when I talk about something, it's you can almost take it to the bank, almost.
All right, sir. Well, I'll
Okay.
let you close this off. Always a pleasure talking to you. I'll let you tell the fans whatever you want to sum up here.
Yeah, I just again, what the JFK documents are going to show and show everybody is that we had. When people start talking about the powers that be, the shadow government, there was one, and there still may be one operating, but there was one in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and it's terrifying to know that. And hopefully, this will give a new chapter to the American story. And I am most Hannibal, which is I think really important to your listeners and viewers. I am most grateful that the government will see that we're not running in the streets with torches and pitchforks and rioting over this information that will hopefully convince them to come out with UFO disclosure.